A wife left stranded by her husband soon realizes he's gone missing.
He was very reliable, so the fact that he wasn't answering his phone, she knew something was very wrong.
She was positive that he just would not have walked out of her life totally. She noticed a really strong smell of bleach in the apartment. Things were broken, thrown all over the place.
After a body turns up, detectives must look for clues close to home.
That's like that. He's a lazy, inconsiderate brat.
Things weren't great between the four of them in the house.
Is there anything you want to say?
In my heart, I feel he was an evil person.
As evidence emerges and suspects are pressed for answers, the grisly details of a man's final hours come to light.
They were going to surprise him and attack him with a samurai sword.
A sword?
He thought he could judge people on who was good and who was bad, and they were going to get rid of him one way or the other.
The small town of Stuart, Florida, isn't known as a dangerous place to live. But just after 8 p.m. on April 21, 2008, police receive an emergency call from 47-year-old Kristen Jensen, who's concerned something has happened to her husband, Gerald.
We learned from Kristen that she was in the VA hospital to detox off of substances. She made arrangements for her husband, Jerry, to pick her up. Sunday, the 20th, was the last time she spoke to him, and she was due to be discharged the next day, the 21st. However, when she was discharged, she kept calling his cell phone, and it kept going to voicemail.
Kristen was initially alarmed because Jerry was very reliable. He was never even late. So the fact that he wasn't answering his phone, Kristen knew something was very wrong.
She was able to make arrangements with the VA to actually have a shuttle transfer her back to her residence.
Kristen tells police when she got home around 5:30 p.m., Jerry was still nowhere to be found. But she does find her daughter Nicole with her boyfriend Chris and their newborn baby who have been living with them.
Kristen had been told by both Nicole and Chris Tomlinson that Jerry had gotten into a fight with somebody on the phone like around 10:30 at night, and it was on his cell phone, and they were afraid he was going to wake the baby.
They went to the library so that they could log into the Wi-Fi, and when they came back home with the baby, Jerry was gone.
Kristen says it seemed possible Jerry had simply forgotten to pick her up until she noticed something concerning.
Anything that he would have taken with him was still there, and especially with his car being there, his keys being there, his clothes being there, his phone was there. She didn't feel it was normal for him just to walk away. Kristen said she noticed a really strong smell of bleach in the apartment, which she thought was unusual. Also, the bedroom no longer had a door, but the bathroom did.
And so she called the police and reported him missing and said, he wouldn't do this, he wouldn't go away, and, where is he?
At this point, she is more convinced than ever that something bad has happened to Jerry.
Jerry Jensen was born on November 6, 1959. He spent his younger years in Albany, New York.
He came from a large family with 7 siblings, and then he moved down to Florida. Jerry made his living as an electrician and as a very talented handyman. Friends and family described Jerry as extremely fun-loving. He loved music, particularly the Rolling Stones. He actually had the band's famous logo tattooed on his chest.
Jerry married, but the relationship didn't last. He was settling into life as a divorcee when he suffered a major setback.
Jerry had an accident and broke his neck.
The recovery was very difficult, and he became more reliant on painkillers.
It was a cycle of going through rehab, being clean for some time, stumbling, going through rehab.
It was around that time he met Kristen Thornhill, a divorced mother of 3 who also struggled with addiction.
My mom, she was in the Marines at one point and got hurt. And I think that might have been where part of her addiction to pain pills set in. And then she was on disability all of my life.
The two began dating and decided to get clean together.
When I was very young, my mom and Jerry had a bit of a touch-and-go relationship and both struggled with addiction, but they seemed to figure it out along the way, I guess, and ended up getting married. Kind of one of those moments of, I'm gonna be okay with this because you seem okay.
But despite Kristen's attempted recovery, the instability at home had left its mark, especially on her oldest daughter, Nicole.
Growing up, things were very chaotic. I was young enough that I didn't really understand what was going on, but my sister did. She didn't get to live with my mom for very long. My dad got to have us on weekends. He came to drop us off, and my mom wasn't home. Eventually, Child Services came and picked us up and put us back with my dad.
Nicole hadn't grown up with her mother. As a matter of fact, Kristen's addiction issues led her to be estranged from Nicole for a large part of her childhood.
4 years after Kristen and Jerry's wedding, Nicole reached out to her mother to reconnect.
When Nicole was turning 18, graduation was coming, my dad lost his job. And so because of that, we weren't able to get a house that we were supposed to move into. My dad told me I was gonna go live with my aunt and uncle. And so Nicole not really having anywhere to go, my mom let her go live with her and Jerry. My sister's relationship with my mom had always been a little bit rocky, but Nicole just loved my mom. Any opportunity she got, she just wanted to go stay with my mom growing up.
Shortly after Nicole moved in, she met Chris Tomlinson on a social networking site devoted to artists.
When my sister was a teenager, she was just very sad. So she turned to art. And she found a website called DeviantArt. And so she would post all of her artwork on there.
Christopher Tomlinson was in his early 20s and into gothic, very dark kind of art. And that spoke to Nicole, and she was the one who actually reached out to him.
My son met Nicole Thornhill online while he was in the Army, stationed in Germany, and instant fall in love. And we're trying to talk him out. You don't know this girl. You haven't even met her. But he said he loved her.
But Chris and Nicole's online relationship grew stronger during his deployment. So when he returned to the States, they were eager to be together.
Chris was now stateside in California. However, Nicole was in Florida, living with Kristen and Jerry. In late 2006, Chris decides to go meet Nicole for the first time.
Chris came to see her for 2 weeks. He was very outgoing and was very showy.
Just 8 months after meeting online, 18-year-old Nicole announced she was moving back to California with 23-year-old Chris.
Jerry and Kristen wanted to support her and decided not to stand in her way.
In California, the couple struggled to make ends meet, and their financial troubles only got worse.
Nicole called Jerry and Kristen to give them surprising news. that she is pregnant and that she's due the following March.
Nicole was 18 and unmarried and didn't know what to do. They ran out of money and didn't have anywhere else to go.
Kristen and Jerry say, absolutely, come live with us, move back to Florida. And that's what Nicole and Chris decide to do. When they first move in, everything's going well, but as the baby is getting closer to arriving, tensions start to rise.
Although Kristen was overjoyed by the birth of her grandchild, that happiness was short-lived. 6 weeks later, a relapse landed Kristen back in a rehabilitation center for 4 days.
Jerry would visit her every day while she was there, and they were planning on him picking her up. So when she was released and he didn't show up, that's when she decided to call the police department.
Since Jerry has been missing for less than 24 hours, police aren't convinced a missing persons report is necessary.
You know, typically when a grown person disappears, they don't jump right in unless there's some real fishy circumstances.
The police department did an attempt to locate, which is usually for an adult that just can't be found. There was no reason to think there was any foul play. They just couldn't be found at that time. Kristen was very adamant that something bad had to have happened to Gerald. She was positive that he just would not have walked out of her life totally.
Jerry's keys were right there on the counter. His favorite pair of jeans that he always wore out were still there. His shoes, everything was there. Something was very wrong.
Coming up, evidence suggests Kristen's suspicions may be correct.
The apartment had been, in their words, ransacked.
And a statewide search comes to a gruesome end.
They found what they believe to be traces of blood.
Police in Stuart, Florida have been on the lookout for 48-year-old Jerry Jensen since his wife Kristen reported him missing more than 48 hours ago. According to his stepdaughter and her boyfriend, Jerry disappeared shortly after having a heated exchange over the phone on the night of April 20th.
Police canvassed the apartment complex, but this really didn't turn up much.
Police investigating missing persons cases with people who have substance abuse problems, they will consider the fact that sometimes substance abuse situations manifest with people being gone for days at a time while they're going on a binge.
In an attempt to determine whether Jerry started using again, officers asked Kristen who Jerry may have confided in. She suggests they speak with a man named Kevin, one of Jerry's closest friends.
Kevin had actually spoken with Jerry just the day before he went missing. And there was nothing that seemed off. He had no plans to leave town.
According to investigators, Kevin said the only problem in Jerry's life was his living situation.
Kevin tells police that Kristen and Jerry had been under a lot of stress. And this stress was mostly caused by Nicole's boyfriend, Chris Tomlinson, who had just moved in with them. Jerry told Kevin that Chris was unemployed. He wasn't really making an effort to take care of Nicole or the baby as a father.
Jerry and Kristen didn't have a lot of disposable income. They were both living on fixed incomes with disability. And so they weren't in a position to have 2, let alone 3 more mouths to feed.
Kevin actually felt that all this stress with Chris is what actually led to Kristen's relapse.
Police wonder if the stress caused Jerry to relapse as well. When police follow up with Kristen on April 25th, she admits Jerry had started taking some pain medication again.
He did have a prescription for them, but sometimes he would get them from a friend of his if he couldn't get his prescription filled or if he ran out.
but she found his prescription drugs, and there were still some pills in the bottle. This was a clear sign that he wasn't leaving to go find more drugs.
Another thing uncovered during her search of the home left Kristen certain of foul play.
Kristen said the only things missing was the comforter off their bed and Jerry. But the bathroom door was broken. The apartment had been, in their words, ransacked. Things were broken, thrown all over the place.
Kristen says when she asked Nicole and Chris what happened, they said they found the apartment that way when they came home from the library.
They thought that this is something that Jerry had done in a fit of rage based on whatever phone call he was on.
She said that her and Christopher went ahead and tried to clean up the house as best as they could because she knew her mother was coming home the next day and didn't want her mom to be upset with the mess.
This new information leads Kristen to think that whomever Jerry may have been on the fight with on the phone could be the person that came over to the apartment and maybe assaulted him or even kidnapped him.
She just had a gut feeling something bad had happened to him.
Police released Kristen, requesting that she keep in touch with any additional information. Since Jerry is an adult who has been missing for less than a week, investigators can't take any serious steps until additional evidence surfaces.
Unless police see some sort of foul play involved, police are usually very guarded and measured about how they investigate missing persons cases. Another thing to add in Jerry's case is Jerry's history of substance abuse.
The wife was having a hard time with the way the police department was handling the case. She started calling supervisors, and the supervisors started contacting the Criminal Investigations Division to make sure that this case was going to be assigned.
My sergeant decided that the investigative unit would look into it and was able to put together, it's called a locator poster, and we used to put them out for missing people. So it had his description on it, like height, weight, body piercings, tattoos, that type of stuff, and it goes out statewide.
The case gets elevated where a full-blown missing persons report and a notification to all state agencies is released. Essentially everybody in the state of Florida is on a lookout.
It wasn't more than an hour or two after that poster went out, I got a call from the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office telling me they believe they found Gerald Jensen in a landfill.
By April 25th, 2008, less than a week has passed since Jerry Jensen was reported missing from his South Florida home. But police in West Palm Beach County think they might have found him after responding to a 911 call.
911, where's your emergency? Calling from the Solid Waste Authority, Palm Beach County, on Jogga Road, and we believe we have found a body in our Class 1 landfill. They're not 100% sure who it is, but they don't want to contaminate anything.
The man who found it drives a bulldozer, and he was looking around and he saw an arm.
The body was not in great shape when they found him. The machinery there at the landfill that turns the garbage has big spikes on the tires, and it tends to tear things up.
It was going to be impossible for investigators to identify it through facial features or dental records.
Fortunately, the body still has some distinguishing marks.
They were able to see some tattoos, and the tattoos that they saw matched the ones on my poster. So they sent the body found to the medical examiner's office and tried to do a fingerprint comparison.
They were able to make a positive identification of Gerald Jensen through a fingerprint.
The medical examiner is also able to determine the cause of death.
We learned that Gerald Jensen's body had been stabbed multiple times and that his throat was slit. So therefore it was deemed to be a homicide.
Two of the detectives went back to speak with Kristen and Nicole and Chris and just see if they could figure out any more information.
Investigators begin by speaking with Jerry's wife, Kristen.
We did break the news to her that Gerald was deceased and that he'd been found in Palm Beach County. She took it very hard and was very upset and hysterical at that point in time.
Since Kristen was in rehab at the time of Jerry's death, she is directly ruled out as a suspect. Now, investigators point their questions toward the other members of the household.
Kristen admitted that things weren't great between the four of them in the house.
How do you like Chris? I don't. What don't you like about him? He's a lazy, inconsiderate brat. I wish Nicole could see it, but she can't.
Chris didn't do anything. He wouldn't get a job. He sat and played video games all day. And every time my mom would nag Chris, my sister would go to Chris's defense.
Kristen tells detectives she even suspects Chris might be AWOL.
He supposedly just got out of the Army and he just came straight here. And he can't show me his DD-214. You don't believe him? Not at all.
She did not believe that he was discharged from the Army. She kept requesting his DD-214 discharge papers and he would not provide it to her.
You're supposed to go through the debriefing and all that. He said no, he left. He was to go to Texas and either be arrested or kicked out of the Army. Fortunately, they kicked him out with no jail time or any of that.
How did Jerry get along with Chris? He didn't at all. They barely spoke. What about with the baby? How's he as a father? He's good. Is he protective of the baby? Mm-hmm. How did Nicole get along with Jerry? She was calling Jerry Dad, and things were just great. And then all of a sudden, Chris shows up. Okay. Yeah. She doesn't want to call him Dad anymore.
Investigators then ask Kristen what she thinks happened to Jerry. Nicole and Chris told her Jerry had been on an angry phone call that evening. She still believes whoever was on that call came looking to settle the score.
He ran in the bedroom to hide or something, and they kicked the door down and beat the out of him. Okay, did any idea who he was talking to? I still can't figure out how it could have been.
While I was starting my interviews, Detective Gerwin was working on getting a search warrant for the records for Gerald's cell phone. And the search warrant came back with a list of calls and times.
Jerry wasn't on the phone that night. That was a lie.
Armed with this information, detectives bring Nicole and Chris in for questioning. They start with Nicole.
We asked her several times how positive she was. The time of the fight was around 10:30. The fact that it was on a cell phone, not a house phone, that they went to the local library, and she was very adamant that she was correct. Once we informed her that that could not possibly have happened because that phone hadn't been used, I asked her if there was anything more that she wanted to tell me, and she blurted out the whole story.
Coming up, a shocking confession.
They started talking about the hallway. That's when he attacked him.
That had to be so terrifying way to die. Someone coming at you with a sword in a confined space. They didn't deserve that.
After Nicole Thornhill discovers that investigators know she and her boyfriend haven't told the truth, she agrees to come clean about what really happened.
Both Nicole Thornhill and Chris Tomlinson weren't getting along with the parents.
She pretty much confirmed the same thing that Kristen had told me, that things were tough between the four of them. And she was worried with it because they had a baby in the house, what was going to happen next.
According to Nicole, one of their issues was their religious differences.
I asked her what her religion was, and she told me that she was new to the Wiccan religion, but Christopher had been in it his whole life and he was considered a high priest.
Wicca is a modern pagan movement often associated with witchcraft, something Jerry couldn't accept.
Jerry didn't understand their Wiccan lifestyle. They really couldn't get through to him.
But Chris and Nicole felt the Jensens' behavior left no room for judgment.
They felt that with their drinking and both of them using prescription drugs, that it wasn't a healthy situation to raise their child in.
Nicole says that ultimately the household became extremely toxic, and she and Chris started to consider drastic measures.
Money may have played a factor in their decision, but she said that it just made things a little easier when they weren't there.
When did you two start talking about wanting to get rid of him? Was it days, weeks?
2 months.
Nicole says their first plan involved drugging him.
I mentioned knocking him out with sleeping pills, making it look like a suicide because they both do so much drugs. We went to Walmart and he bought those weird generic sleeping pills.
So you guys never saw an effect when you put the pills in their drinks?
Nothing happened.
When that didn't work, they resorted to a more brutal method. And Kristen's time away at rehab provided the perfect opportunity.
The plan was that Chris and Nicole were going to surprise him, and Chris was going to attack him with a samurai sword that he kept in the house.
Christopher decided they were going to stay up all night and attack Gerald when he woke up first thing in the morning. So Nicole said about 7 o'clock they could hear him moving around, and Christopher told her to take the baby and go outside for a walk.
Nicole says when she returned, Chris told her Jerry was dead.
Tomlinson said he came out of the room with the sword, confronted him, stabbed him in the front.
The sword?
Yes,
There's a wall to there? Okay.
Did he tell you how many times he stabbed him?
I think he said 3. I think he ended up running him into the bathroom door. The broken door. I'm about to hear out of his body, and then I had to look away.
Okay. Where's the knife that Chris used?
Under the bed.
That had to be so terrifying way to die, knowing that, someone coming at you with a sword in a confined space. They didn't deserve that.
Nicole said that they then took a tarp and wrapped Gerald's body in it and then wrapped him in the comforter from her mother's bed and put him in the bathtub so they could clean up the mess in the bathroom and the hallway. They bagged everything up, then drove it over to the dumpster on site and threw everything in the dumpster.
Detectives are immediately sent to the apartment to confirm Nicole's claims.
The detectives found a set of swords that were underneath the bed. They found what they believed to be traces of blood on the sword.
Investigators also find evidence in the kitchen of the couple's earlier attempt to drug Jerry.
I opened up the cabinet and saw a bottle of tequila. I could see the bottom had white powder soot in the bottom with a little bit of blue color to it. these were the pills that were crushed up. I opened up the refrigerator and found a half gallon of partially consumed milk. I could see blue sit in the bottom, which was also indicative of the sleeping pills. So those were collected for evidence.
While the crime scene unit was searching the house, they did find a Walmart receipt.
What was interesting about the receipt, it showed that the sleeping pills were purchased on April the 22nd, the day after the murder.
Detectives confront Nicole with the new evidence.
You had told us that the two of you had been planning something for Jerry. Had you ever planned something for your mom?
Yeah.
What was that?
Pretty much the same thing.
The same thing how?
To get rid of her.
Nicole Thornhill has just confessed she and her boyfriend conspired to murder her stepfather. And they intended to kill her mother next.
Okay, how were you going to get rid of her?
I wanted to do the sleeping pills because she had just done it so many times before, trying to kill herself. She tried to do it in front of me.
Hey, why'd you want to get rid of her?
I can't stand her anymore.
According to her and Chris' beliefs, anyone who used drugs was not a good person and couldn't be around them, and they also didn't want them around the baby.
What's gonna happen to me?
You're going to go to jail. Okay? You're being charged with first-degree murder.
Will I ever be able to see Chris again?
I doubt it.
What about my baby?
The way that both Chris and Nicole felt that they had been impacted as children with parents leaving, that's what they did to their own child. Their baby's life is now essentially changed forever.
After they're finished questioning Nicole, investigators sit down with Chris, who was being held in a separate room. Unaware of Nicole's confession, Chris is sticking to a very different story.
I asked him how he felt about Gerald. He didn't like the way Gerald acted by yelling and fighting and drinking and the drugs. I asked Christopher about the Wiccan aspect of it, and he told me that he was a high priest. He believed that he could see auras around people, and he did not think people with a bad aura should be allowed to live in the same world as his child.
When investigators tell Chris they found Jerry's body, he acts surprised.
He was found in a landfill in Palm Beach County. How does that make you feel?
That really sucks. I don't wish anybody dead. Even if they're the biggest ass in the world.
Okay. Did you do anything to him?
No.
You have no idea how he got in that landfill?
No.
But Chris changes his tune when he learns about Nicole's confession.
He was killed in that apartment. There's no question. And we're going to be able to prove that. Now, how it's portrayed is up to you. I'd like to know what your side of the story is.
Chris, what happened?
Can I get some water?
Sure.
We got him a drink, and then after he told us that, yes, there had been a fight, but it was self-defense.
When did this happen?
Early morning. Yeah, I was in the kitchen getting breakfast to go to the bedroom, and he came out and started yelling like he was ready to fight, which has happened more than once. I instinctively grabbed the weapon, and, he lunged at me, and I kicked him back into the hallway. And I tried to run out the door, and he grabbed me, and I lost it.
You lost it? What do you mean? You got to describe that for us?
I just turned around and tried to break out of it, and ended up stabbing him.
He changed his story several times as to how he happened to have the sword in his possession, where the fight occurred, who hit whom first, and we then told him that we did not believe that's the way the story occurred. And eventually he came around and told us that they had planned the poisoning first, and eventually they decided that if Kristen was out of the way at the VA rehab, then they could attack and kill Gerald.
Is there anything you want to say or you can think that we haven't asked you that you think needs to go on the record?
In my heart, I felt he was an evil person.
Christopher Tomlinson believed that he could judge people on who was good and who was bad. Once he had made that decision that Gerald was bad, he was going to get rid of him one way or the other.
Chris and Nicole are both arrested for the murder of Jerry Jensen.
I got on the computer and, Googling Nicole's name, Christopher's name, and this stuff came up, and I'm like, I am in such disbelief that my son did this.
With 2 confessions and a list of evidence, prosecutors feel this will be an open and shut case. But 6 days after the arrests, Nicole makes it much more complicated.
Nicole Thornhill was trying to reach out to the Stuart Police Department because she wanted to speak to a detective to tell the real story.
Nicole Thornhill has implicated herself and her boyfriend, Chris Tomlinson, in a plot to murder both of her parents. But now that she's been arrested, she changes her statement.
At this point, she's figured out, after being in jail for a week, that she's in a lot of trouble. And so now she's trying to put it all on Tomlinson. And she's claiming that she was scared of him and that he was controlling and that she only helped because he made her help. And it just contradicted a lot of the things that she'd already said beforehand.
The problem is she wasn't even there when the murder occurred. But planning and doing something that would aid or assist prior to the murder could be sufficient and lead you to be just as guilty as if you committed the murder yourself.
A grand jury agrees. They indict both Nicole and Chris for first-degree murder.
We added adulterating a food or drug, which is punishable by up to 30 years in prison. We added attempted murder of Kristen on to both of them.
A judge rules Chris and Nicole are to be tried separately, but Nicole chooses not to face a jury.
What Nicole Thornhill did was, in effect, enter a no-contest plea, whereby she did not admit to any of this information. She just acknowledged that evidence was sufficient to convict her.
The deal does not require her to testify against Chris.
We didn't call her as a witness. We didn't think that she would be credible because she'd given so many different statements.
On May 18th, 2010, the trial for Chris Tomlinson begins.
The best argument the defense had was that it was self-defense. They couldn't dispute that their guy did it because he admitted to it. But why did you bring a sword into the hallway if you weren't planning to attack him? It was just another one of those inconsistencies that didn't match up to his story.
The jury takes only 3 hours to reach a verdict.
On May 20th, 2010, the jury finds Christopher Tomlinson guilty of first-degree murder, 2 counts of attempted murder against both Jerry and Kristen. In Florida, convictions for first-degree murder come with an automatic life sentence. So the judge immediately sentenced Christopher to life in prison plus another 60 years.
Christopher, to this day, still has not told me in his words, why? And I looked at Christopher, you can had all this, but you got involved with Nicole and the Army messed you up. So all of those combined, he snapped, and he can never come back from it.
When Nicole is sentenced a month later, there is a surprising character witness.
One of the people who show up and ask for leniency for her is her mother. Kristen looked at her daughter and she said, "I believe in you."
My mom continued to be there for my sister because she knew something was wrong. And my mom continued to fight for my sister.
After hearing from Kristen, the judge did not sentence Nicole to life in prison, but gave her what is almost the equivalent of a life sentence. He sentenced her to 50 years.
Justice was served. However, this will never bring back Jerry, who had done nothing wrong except try to take in two people that were in need of help, and he paid for that with his life.
You know, everybody has their demons, everybody has their past. It doesn't mean that you should have been brutally murdered and thrown away like a piece of garbage. I mean, think about that. What could be so bad that anyone would deserve that?
Kristen Jensen died in 2020. But before her death, she and her daughter managed to make amends.
Nicole finally got to have the relationship with my mom that she always wanted, and vice versa. My mom struggled with her grief and pain over what happened with my sister, but they had a great relationship eventually.
The room still smells like detergent and dust, like time paused mid-breath and never resumed. A bed untouched. A charger still plugged into the wall. A window slightly open, just enough to let the night slip in. California, summer of 2003. Heat clings to everything. The kind of heat that makes people restless, keeps them awake longer than they should be. 17 years old. Bright. Ordinary. The kind of girl no one expects to disappear. And yet she does.
No scream. No struggle.
No shattered glass. Just absence. The kind that creeps in quietly and settles like a stain no one can scrub out. At first, it's nothing. A missing teen. Another name added to a list that grows longer every year. The assumption is immediate, almost automatic runaway. It's easier that way. Easier to believe she chose to leave rather than accept that something took her. Officers jot down notes with practiced calm. Friends are questioned. Parents reassured. She'll come back. They always say that. They need to. Because the alternative is too heavy, too final. But even in those first hours, something feels wrong. Not loud. Not obvious. Just a quiet imbalance that refuses to settle. Her shoes are still by the door. Her favorite pair, worn at the edges, but never abandoned. Her bag is still inside. Wallet untouched. No extra clothes missing. No signs of planning, no hint of departure. Just a girl who stepped outside and vanished into a night that swallowed her whole. The neighborhood is quiet, too quiet. Streetlights flicker. Dogs bark in the distance, then fall silent again. No witnesses come forward. No cars reported.
No strangers noticed.
It's as if the moment she left her house, the world simply erased her. But then there's the message. 9:42 p.m. Short. Uneasy. Almost casual if you read it too fast. I think someone is watching me. It lands in her friend's phone like a whisper. Easy to overlook. At the time, it doesn't spark panic. Teenagers say things like that. Paranoia, jokes, exaggeration. It's filed away, just another detail among many. But details have a way of changing over time. What seems small in the beginning can grow sharper, heavier, more dangerous the longer it sits. Her mother doesn't sleep that night, or the next, or the one after that. The porch light stays on, always on. It becomes a ritual, a signal, a refusal to accept silence as an answer. Days stretch into weeks. Volunteers comb through fields, search abandoned lots, call her name into empty spaces. Flyers cover telephone poles, grocery store windows, gas station counters. Her face becomes familiar to strangers, a symbol of something unfinished, something wrong. The police follow procedure. Interviews. Timelines. They retrace her last known steps. She was seen walking near the end of the block. Nothing unusual. No one following her. No signs of distress. Just a girl moving through her own neighborhood, unaware that she's being watched. Or maybe she was aware. Maybe that message wasn't paranoia at all. Maybe it was the last warning she had time to give. The days pass. Leads dry up. The search radius expands, then contracts, then fades into routine. The case file thickens, but the answers don't come. Detectives revisit the same streets, knock on the same doors, ask the same questions. And every time, the answers stay the same.
No one saw anything.
No one heard anything. No one knows anything. It becomes a pattern.
A wall.
Impenetrable. Time moves on. It always does. Weeks become months. Months become years. The headlines shrink. The urgency fades. New cases replace old ones. The town adjusts, learns to live around the absence. But the house doesn't. Inside, everything remains exactly as it was. Her room untouched. Her belongings frozen in place, waiting for hands that will never return. The porch light continues to burn, cutting through the dark night after night, a quiet act of defiance against forgetting. And somewhere in a storage room, a box is labeled and shelved. Cold case. 2 words that carry weight far beyond their simplicity. It means the search has slowed. It means the answers have drifted just out of reach. It means the silence has won, at least for now. But silence is never empty. Years later, the file is reopened. Not because of a breakthrough, not because of a new witness, but because of something harder to define. A feeling, a sense that something was missed. That somewhere in the details, buried beneath assumptions and early conclusions, there's a thread waiting to be pulled. A new detective takes the case. Younger, unfamiliar with the shortcuts taken in 2003. He reads everything. Every report, every interview, every note scribbled in the margins. And he notices the same thing that never quite fit. The message. I think someone is watching me. He reads it again. Slower this time. Not as a throwaway line, but as a statement. A warning. A clue. Watching from where? He studies the layout of the neighborhood as it was back then. Fewer houses. Larger gaps. Darker corners. Places where someone could stand unnoticed. Places where someone could observe without being seen. He walks the streets himself, years after the fact, trying to feel what she might have felt. Trying to see what she might have seen. And then he notices it. A house at the edge of her route. Not remarkable. Not suspicious. Just there. Close enough to see her. Close enough to follow. Close enough to matter. Back in 2003, it meant nothing. The man who lived there was quiet. Kept to himself. No criminal record.
No plans.
No reason to investigate further. So they didn't. But now, years later, with fresh eyes and no assumptions, it feels different. The detective pulls old records. Property ownership.
Names. Dates.
The man moved away not long after the disappearance. No one thought to connect it at the time. People move. Lives change. It happens every day. But timing matters. Patterns matter. And sometimes what looks like coincidence is anything but. The investigation shifts. Slowly at first. Carefully. Because this isn't just a missing person anymore. It's something deeper. Something darker. The kind of case that doesn't fade, even when it's buried. They return to the property. The house is still standing. New owners. New paint. New life layered over old foundations. They explain the situation. Ask permission. The kind of request that turns ordinary homes into something else entirely. Something heavier. Something haunted by possibilities no one wants to consider. The backyard is quiet. Grass trimmed.
Clean.
Normal. Too normal. They bring in equipment. Technology that didn't exist in 2003. Tools that can see beneath the surface, past the layers of time and soil. Ground-penetrating radar sweeps slowly across the yard, methodical, precise. At first, nothing. Just earth. Just emptiness. Then a disturbance.
Small.
Subtle, but unmistakable. A patch where the soil doesn't match.
A shape that doesn't belong.
The air changes. The kind of silence that settles in before something irreversible happens. No one speaks.
No one needs to.
They all feel it. They dig.
Carefully.
Then faster. Each shovelful of dirt pulls them closer to something that has waited years to be found. Something that was never meant to be discovered. The ground gives way, layer by layer, until the truth begins to surface. And in that moment, the case stops being a question. It becomes an answer. Not complete.
Not yet.
But undeniable. The girl who vanished into the night never left at all. She was there. Just beneath the surface. Waiting. And as the realization spreads, as the weight of it settles over the scene, one thought cuts through everything else, sharp and unrelenting. She was right. Someone was watching her. And whoever it was had been closer than anyone ever imagined. The dirt doesn't give up its secrets easily. It clings, heavy,
damp,
as if it has spent years protecting what lies beneath. Every shovelful feels like a violation of something buried too long, something that should have stayed hidden but refused to disappear. The investigators slow down as fragments begin to emerge. Not whole, not clean, just pieces. Enough to confirm what no one wanted to say out loud. Enough to turn a missing teen into a homicide that has been waiting in silence for 2 decades. The backyard becomes a crime scene again. Yellow tape cuts across fresh grass. Neighbors gather at a distance, whispering, pointing, trying to reconcile the quiet life they've known with the reality unfolding just feet away. Children are called inside. Curtains shift. Phones come out. The past is no longer buried. It's exposed, raw, impossible to ignore. Forensics moves in with precision. Every inch documented. Every fragment cataloged.
Soil samples taken.
Measurements recorded. The kind of methodical work that transforms horror into evidence. The remains are fragile, altered by time, but they carry weight. They carry truth. And truth, once uncovered, demands to be followed. The identification process begins. Dental records, DNA extraction, cross-referencing with what little was preserved from 2003. It takes time. Days stretch into weeks. But the answer, when it comes, is certain. It's her. The girl who walked out of her house on a warm California night and vanished without a trace never left that neighborhood. She was taken, hidden, and forgotten beneath a patch of ground no one thought to question. The announcement hits the town like a shockwave. Headlines return, louder this time. Not speculation, not hope, reality. Remains identified in 2003 cold case. Missing teen confirmed dead after 20 years. The words are heavier now. Final. Unavoidable. Her mother hears it the same way she's heard every update for 2 decades, with a mixture of dread and desperate need. Closure, they call it. But closure is a word people use when they don't understand what it really means. Because this isn't an ending. It's a transformation. The question shifts from where is she to something far darker. Who did this?
And why?
The focus turns back to the house, back to the man who lived there in 2003. His name, once buried in property records and forgotten paperwork, resurfaces. Investigators dig into his past. Not just surface-level checks this time, but everything. Employment history, financial records, social connections, patterns. At first, it's unremarkable, ordinary, the kind of life that blends into the background. Jobs that don't stand out, addresses that change just often enough to avoid attention. No violent criminal record, no arrests that would raise alarms. Just a man who existed quietly, moving through the world without leaving a noticeable trace. But quiet doesn't mean innocent. And ordinary doesn't mean safe. They track his movements after 2003. He left the area within months of the disappearance. No clear reason. No job transfer. No family emergency. Just gone. A relocation that, at the time, meant nothing. But now, in the shadow of what's been uncovered, feels deliberate. Interviews begin. Old neighbors, former co-workers, people who might have known him, even slightly. The answers come back vague. Kept to himself. Didn't talk much. Seemed normal. Always that word, normal. It echoes through case files like a shield, protecting something darker beneath the surface. One neighbor remembers something small. Not enough to raise suspicion back then. Just a detail that lingered without meaning. A light in the backyard late at night. Digging sounds. Slow, deliberate movements. But memory is unreliable. It shifts. It bends. And after 20 years, it's hard to separate what was real from what feels real now. Still, the timeline tightens. The night she disappeared. The message at 9:42 p.m. I think someone is watching me. Investigators reconstruct her last movements again, but this time with a different lens. Not as a runaway, not as a teenager acting on impulse, but as someone reacting to a threat. Someone aware, at least in those final moments, that something wasn't right. Her path brings her near his house. Close enough to be seen. Close enough to be followed. The theory begins to take shape. Not a random act. Not a passing stranger. Someone local. Someone who knew the area. Someone who had the opportunity and the privacy to act without interruption. They revisit the evidence recovered from the site. Soil analysis reveals layering inconsistent with natural settling. There was digging. Intentional. Controlled. The depth suggests planning, not panic. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an accident. It was a decision. And decisions leave traces. The lab processes everything. Fibers. Residue. Microscopic fragments that survived years underground. Each piece adds to the picture, slowly, methodically, building a case that didn't exist for 2 decades. Then comes the DNA. A partial profile, degraded but usable. It doesn't match anything in the system at first. No prior convictions. No existing records. But databases have expanded since 2003. New methods allow for connections that were impossible before. Familial matching. Genealogical tracing. The kind of science that turns anonymity into exposure. A lead emerges. Distant at first. A relative. Someone who submitted DNA for an unrelated reason. The connection is small, but it's enough to narrow the field. Investigators follow the thread, mapping out family trees, tracing lines that stretch across states and years. And at the center of it, the same name surfaces again. The man from the house. The one who moved away. The one who is never questioned.
Until now.
A warrant is prepared, not for arrest yet, but for collection. A sample. Something to compare. Something to confirm what the evidence is beginning to suggest. They find him living a quiet life in another state. Older now. Slower. The kind of person neighbors describe the same way they always do. Keeps to himself. Seems normal. The pattern repeats, unchanged by time. When officers approach, there's no resistance.
No immediate panic.
Just confusion, or at least the appearance of it. He agrees to answer questions. Agrees to provide a DNA sample. There's a calmness to it that feels almost rehearsed, like he's spent years believing this moment would never come. Back in the lab, the comparison begins. Numbers, markers, sequences. The kind of data that strips away doubt and replaces it with certainty. The results don't take long. It's a match. Not circumstantial. Not partial. Definitive. The room shifts when the confirmation comes in. There's no celebration, no sense of victory, just a quiet acknowledgement that something long buried has finally surfaced. The kind of moment that feels heavy, irreversible. Because now, the case isn't just reopened. It's alive. And so is the man who may have ended it. They bring him in again. This time, it's different. The tone, the questions, the weight of what's known versus what's still hidden. He sits across from detectives, the years between then and now compressed into a single moment. They present the evidence, the remains, the location, the DNA. Each piece laid out carefully, methodically, leaving less and less room for denial. He listens.
Silent. Still.
But something changes. It's subtle, a shift in posture, a hesitation before answering, the kind of crack that doesn't break everything at once, but signals that the surface isn't as solid as it once seemed. The questions come sharper now. Where were you that night? Why did you leave so soon after? How do you explain the DNA? The room tightens with each one, the air thick, heavy with expectation, because this is the moment where truth either surfaces or retreats deeper into silence. Outside, the world continues as if nothing has changed. Cars pass, people move, life goes on, but inside that room, everything hangs in balance. A cold case, frozen for 20 years, now on the edge of something final. Not closure.
Not yet.
But movement. And for the first time since that night in 2003, the story is no longer standing still. It's moving forward. Slowly. Relentlessly. Toward an answer that has waited in the dark for far too long. The room is too quiet for a lie to survive long. Fluorescent lights hum overhead, steady, indifferent, washing everything in a pale glare that leaves no shadows to hide in. A metal table, 2 chairs, a recorder blinking red. Time feels slower here, heavier, as if every second presses down, demanding something in return. Across from the detectives, he sits still, hands folded, eyes steady but not relaxed. Not anymore. They don't rush. They let the silence stretch. Because silence, when it lingers long enough, begins to speak on its own. He's been here before in rooms like this, answering questions that meant nothing. Routine. Harmless. But this isn't routine anymore. This isn't harmless. The evidence has changed the gravity of everything, pulling the conversation into a place where small inconsistencies matter, where every word is weighed, dissected, compared. They start simple. His name. His history. His time in California. He answers calmly, measured. Nothing unusual. The kind of responses that feel practiced, not necessarily rehearsed, but refined over years of telling the same story to himself. A life reduced to facts.
Dates.
Places.
Jobs.
Movements. Then they shift. June 2003. The night she disappeared. Where were you? He pauses. Not long. Just enough. At home, he says, watching television. Alone. Always alone. The detectives nod, as if they've heard it 100 times.
Because they have.
It's the most common answer in cases like this. Safe. Unverifiable. Designed to end the question before it begins. But this time, it doesn't. They slide a photograph across the table. The backyard. the marked disturbance. The place where she was found. His eyes flicker, just for a second, but it's there. A break in the surface. A ripple in the calm.
They don't comment on it.
They just let it hang. Then another photo. The excavation. The remains. The reality he can no longer ignore. He shifts in his seat, not dramatically, just enough to register discomfort, enough to suggest that the narrative he's been holding on to is starting to strain under pressure. We found her in your yard. The words land flat.
No emotion. No accusation.
Just fact. He looks at the photo again, longer this time, as if staring at it will change what it shows, as if time might reverse itself if he just waits long enough. I don't know how that got there. The sentence is thin, fragile. It barely holds together. And he knows it. They all do. Because the next piece is already coming. DNA. One word. Heavy. Final. They explain it slowly, clearly. No room for misunderstanding. No technical jargon to hide behind. Just the truth, stripped down to its core. Your DNA was found with the remains. Another pause. Longer this time. The silence stretches until it almost snaps. And then, that's not possible. But it is. And they don't need to argue it. The evidence speaks louder than any denial. It sits there unmovable, unchangeable, forcing the conversation forward whether he wants it to or not. They lean in. Not physically. But in tone. In focus. Because now, the questions aren't about where he was. They're about what happened. Did you know her? A simple question.
Direct.
He hesitates. Just a fraction.
No, he says.
But the hesitation is enough. They catch it. Hold on to it. Because hesitation is the space where truth tries to surface. We have witnesses who place her near your house. We have evidence that she didn't leave the neighborhood. We have her remains in your yard. Each statement is a step, controlled, intentional, building a path he can't easily step away from. And then they return to the message. 9:42 p.m. I think someone is watching me. They let him hear it. They let it sit in the air between them. Because now it's not just a sentence. It's a connection. A bridge between what she felt in those final moments and what they're beginning to understand now. His jaw tightens. Subtle. But visible. And in that moment, something shifts again. Not a confession. Not yet. But the resistance changes shape. It becomes less certain. Less solid. More reactive. People say things like that all the time, he says. Doesn't mean anything. But it does. And they know it. Because everything about this case points back to that moment. That feeling. That awareness. She knew. Maybe not exactly what. Maybe not exactly who. But she knew enough to be afraid. And fear doesn't come from nothing. The detectives change tactics. Not pressure. Not aggression. Just patience. They start to fill in the gaps themselves, speaking the theory out loud, piece by piece, watching his reactions, measuring every movement, every blink, every breath. She walks out of her house. She feels watched. She passes your property. You see her. Maybe you've seen her before. Maybe you've been watching longer than that night. They pause. Let it settle. Let him hear it as a possibility, as something that could be denied or corrected. He doesn't interrupt. Doesn't object. just listens. You approach her. Maybe you say something. Maybe she tries to leave. Maybe she runs. Another pause. The room feels smaller now, tighter, the air heavier. Something happens. Something that escalates. Something that doesn't stop. And then, you have a decision to make. The words hang there unfinished, because they don't need to be completed. The implication is enough. The weight of it fills the space. His breathing changes. Slightly faster. Less controlled. And for the first time, he looks away. Not at the photos. Not at the table. But somewhere else. Somewhere distant. As if he's seeing something they can't. As if the past, buried for 20 years, is starting to replay itself, whether he wants it to or not. They don't speak. They let him sit in it. Because this is where the break happens. Not in the confrontation. Not in the accusation. But in the silence that follows. Seconds pass. Then a minute. Then more. The recorder keeps blinking.
Steady.
Unforgiving. Capturing everything. Finally, he exhales.
Slow.
Controlled. But different. And when he speaks again, his voice is lower. Quieter. I didn't mean for it to happen. The words are almost lost in a room. But they're there. And everything changes. The detectives don't react. Not outwardly. Because this is fragile. This moment. This shift. Push too hard, and it closes. Move too fast, and it breaks.
So they stay still.
Let him continue. She was walking, he says, trailing off. I saw her. A pause. I just wanted to talk. The sentence sounds hollow, incomplete, as if even he doesn't fully believe it. But it's something. It's movement. And movement, in a case like this, is everything. What happened next? The question is soft. Almost neutral. But it carries weight. Because now, the story isn't theoretical. It's his. And he has to decide how much of it to let out. He rubs his hands together. A nervous gesture. One that wasn't there before. She got scared. Another pause. Tried to leave. His eyes stay fixed on the table. Not on them. Not on the photos. Just the surface. Like it's easier to speak if he doesn't have to see the reality of what he's saying. I grabbed her. The room tightens again. Not physically, but emotionally. The space shifts. Because now the line has been crossed. From denial to admission. From distance to involvement. The detectives remain steady. Unmoving. But inside, the case is accelerating. Years of silence collapsing into minutes. What happened after that? He swallows. Hard. It wasn't supposed to go that far. Another fragment. Another piece. Each one incomplete on its own, but together forming something undeniable. She fought. The words come slower now. Heavier. Like each one costs more than the last. I try to stop her from screaming. And then... He stops. The sentence unfinished. But it doesn't need to be completed. Because they all know where it leads. The room falls silent again. But this silence is different. Not empty. Not waiting.
Filled.
With truth. With consequence. with the weight of something that can't be taken back. Outside, the world continues as it always has. Unaware. Unchanged. But inside that room, a cold case that spent 20 years in darkness is finally revealing its shape. Not all at once. Not cleanly. But piece by piece. Word by word. And as the confession begins to take form, one thing becomes clear. This wasn't a disappearance. It wasn't a mystery. It was a moment. A single moment that changed everything. And for 20 years, it stayed buried.
Until now.
The air in the room doesn't move anymore. It sits heavy, pressed down by the weight of words that can't be taken back. The recorder keeps blinking, steady, indifferent, capturing every breath, every hesitation, every fracture in a story that has held for 20 years and is now starting to collapse under its own weight. He doesn't look up. His eyes stay fixed on the table, as if the surface can absorb what he's about to say, as if speaking without seeing makes it less real. The detectives don't interrupt. They don't rush. Because this is the moment that matters. Not the evidence. Not the discovery. This. The unraveling. The point where silence gives way to something irreversible. You grabbed her. The words are repeated back to him, not as accusation, but as confirmation. A marker in the timeline. A line that can't be erased. He nods.
Small.
Almost invisible. But it's enough. She tried to scream, he says.
His voice is different now.
Lower. Strained. Like it's pushing through something thick, something resistant. I didn't want anyone to hear. Another pause. Longer. The kind that stretches until it feels like it might break. So I covered her mouth. The sentence lands harder than anything before it. Not because it's loud, but because it's simple.
Direct.
The kind of truth that doesn't need embellishment to carry weight. The detectives exchange a brief glance, then return their focus to him. No reaction.
No judgment.
Just attention. What happened next? The question comes softly, but it cuts through the silence with precision. He exhales, slow, uneven. She kept fighting. The words come in fragments now, broken pieces of a memory he's trying to reconstruct, or maybe trying to control. I held on. Another pause. Too long. And then she stopped moving. The room tightens. Not visibly, not audibly, but it's there. A shift in the atmosphere, like something has settled into place, something final. Time seems to fold in on itself. 20 years collapsing into a single moment. A single decision. A single action that can't be undone. The detectives let it sit. They don't fill the silence. They don't push forward immediately. Because sometimes the space between words says more than the words themselves. Did you check on her? He nods again, slower this time. I thought she passed out. Another fragment. I didn't think.
He stops.
The sentence hangs unfinished, suspended in the air like something fragile. You didn't think she was dead. He shakes his head.
No.
But the truth is already there, embedded in everything he said, in the way his voice shifts, in the way his hands move, restless now, no longer controlled. What did you do after? The question is inevitable. And he knows it. His breathing changes again, faster, shallow. I panicked. The word is almost automatic, a reflex, the default explanation for what comes next. But panic doesn't explain everything. It doesn't account for time, for decisions, for actions that follow. I didn't know what to do. Another pause. So I took her to the backyard. The image forms without needing to be described.
The house. The door.
The transition from inside to outside. From light to darkness. From something that might still be fixed to something that can't. Was she alive? The question is direct. Unavoidable. He doesn't answer immediately. His jaw tightens. I don't know. But the hesitation speaks louder than certainty ever could. You dug a hole. He nods.
It took time.
The admission is quiet, almost detached, as if he's describing something routine, something ordinary. But there's nothing ordinary about it. Nothing routine about what it means. Did anyone see you?
No.
The answer comes quickly this time. Too quickly. As if he's clinging to that detail, holding on to it as something that protected him all these years. The detectives note it, but they don't challenge it yet.
Not yet.
You buried her. Another nod.
Yes.
The word is barely audible. The room falls silent again. But this silence is different from the others. It's heavier. Final. Because now, the outline of what happened is clear. Not every detail, not every moment, but enough to understand the shape of it. Enough to see how a night that began like any other ended in something irreversible. They shift again.
Carefully.
Because this isn't over. Not even close. Why didn't you call for help? The question lingers. Simple. But devastating. He doesn't answer right away. Instead, he stares at his hands. Like they might still carry something. Like they might reveal something he can't say out loud. I was scared. Another reflex. Another explanation that sounds thin against the weight of everything else. Scared of what? No answer. Just silence. The kind that fills the room, pressing in from all sides. Scared of getting caught. This time, it's not a question. It's a statement. And he doesn't deny it. The detectives let that settle. Because it matters. Because it shifts the narrative from accident to decision. From panic to concealment. You had time. The words are deliberate. You had time to call someone. To get help. To tell the truth. Another pause. But you chose to hide it. He closes his eyes. Just for a moment. As if shutting out the room might undo what's already been said. I didn't think it would matter. The sentence is quiet. Almost lost. But it lands with a force that echoes through everything. Because it reveals something deeper. Not just fear. Not just panic. But a decision. A calculation. A belief that what happened could be contained, buried, erased. For 20 years it almost was. The detectives sit back slightly. Not in relaxation, but in acknowledgement. The story is there now. Incomplete, yes. But undeniable. They begin to clarify. Step by step.
Detail by detail.
You approached her outside. You grabbed her. You covered her mouth. She stopped moving. You took her to the backyard. You buried her. Each statement is met with a nod. A confirmation. A quiet acceptance of what can no longer be denied. The timeline fills in. The gaps close. The unknown becomes known. And with each piece, the case that once sat in a box labeled cold becomes something else entirely. Active.
Resolved.
But resolution doesn't feel like relief. It doesn't feel like closure. It feels heavy. Complicated. Because the answers don't undo the years. They don't bring her back. They don't erase the nights her mother left the porch light on, waiting for footsteps that would never come. The detectives ask one more question. The one that lingers beneath everything else. Did you know she was scared? He opens his eyes, looks up for the first time. And in that moment, there's something there. Not remorse. Not fully. But awareness. A recognition of something he can't distance himself from anymore. She looked at me, he says. A pause. Like she knew. The words hang in the air, heavy, final. Because they connect everything. The message. The fear. The moment. I think someone is watching me. She was right. Not in a vague, imagined way, but in a real, immediate sense. She was being watched. Followed. Seen. And, in that final moment, she understood something no one else did. The room falls silent again. But this time, there's nothing left to fill it. The story has been told. Not completely. Not perfectly. But enough. Enough to turn a cold case into a confession. Enough to give shape to something that lived in shadows for 2 decades. Outside, the world continues. Unchanged. Unaware. But inside that room, everything has shifted. The past has caught up. And the truth, buried for 20 years beneath layers of silence and soil, is finally, undeniably, exposed. The confession doesn't end the room's tension. It changes it. The silence that follows isn't empty anymore. It's dense, saturated with everything that has just been said, everything that can never be unsaid. The recorder keeps blinking, steady as a pulse, turning breath into evidence, turning words into something permanent. He sits there, shoulders slightly collapsed now, the structure of denial gone, replaced by something looser, more uncertain. The detectives don't move in yet. They let the weight do its work. Because confession is not the end. It's the beginning of detail. And detail is where truth either holds or breaks. They shift the conversation carefully, almost gently, but every question now carries precision. Not broad anymore. Not theoretical. Specific. What time did you see her? He blinks, slow, like he's reaching back through years that don't want to be remembered clearly. Late, he says. After dark. Not enough. They need more. Before or after 9:42. He hesitates again. After. The answer lands against the known timeline. The message. The fear. The last moment she reached out. It aligns too cleanly to be coincidence. So, after she sent that message, you were already watching her. He doesn't respond. But he doesn't deny it either. The silence becomes confirmation. They press forward. Where were you when you saw her?
Inside, he says.
Near the window. The image sharpens. A figure behind glass. Lights off. Watching. Waiting. Not random. Not accidental. Positioned. Intentional. Had you seen her before that night? Another pause. Yeah. Short. Flat. How many times? I don't know. But the uncertainty feels selective. Controlled. As if he's giving just enough to answer without revealing too much. You knew her routine. This time, he doesn't answer at all. Because the implication is clear. This wasn't a single moment.
It didn't start that night.
It built. Quietly. Unnoticed. Until it crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. The detectives let that sit, then move forward. You approached her outside your house.
Yes.
Did you say anything? I tried to talk to her.
What did you say?
He exhales. I don't remember exactly. But memory doesn't just disappear like that. Not for something this significant. Not for something that changed everything. She reacted.
Yes. How?
She got scared. Another fragment. Another piece. Did she try to run?
Yes.
And that's when you grab her. A nod. The sequence locks into place. Not clean, not complete, but clear enough to follow. Clear enough to understand how quickly something escalated from nothing to everything. The detectives lean into the next layer. Inside the house. Because the backyard is where it ended.
But the house is where it changed.
Did you take her inside? A pause. Then.
Yes.
The word lands heavy. The room shifts again. Because this matters. This changes the timeline.
Changes the nature of what happened.
Where in the house? Living room. Another image forms. A space that looked ordinary.
Couch.
Table. Maybe a television still flickering in the background. A place meant for routine, for comfort, now tied to something else entirely. Was she conscious?
Yes.
What was she doing? Crying. The word is quiet, but it carries weight. What did she say? He swallows. She told me to let her go. Another pause. Said she wouldn't tell anyone. The detectives don't react, but the meaning is clear. She was trying to survive. Trying to negotiate. Trying to de-escalate something she didn't fully understand but knew was dangerous. And you didn't let her go?
No.
The answer is immediate.
No hesitación.
Because now the pattern is set. The decisions are clear. What happened next? He shifts again, uncomfortable now in a way he wasn't before. The details are closer, sharper, harder to distance from. She tried to get past me. And then? I grabbed her again. Harder this time. The escalation continues, step by step, each decision narrowing the path until there's only one direction left. You covered her mouth.
Yes.
To stop her from screaming.
Yes.
And then she stopped moving. Another nod. The repetition doesn't change the facts, but it solidifies them, reinforces them, turns fragments into structure. They pivot slightly. After she stopped moving, how long did you wait? He frowns, thinking. I don't know. Minutes. Maybe longer. Did you check if she was breathing?
I tried.
What did you find? He hesitates. Nothing. The word lands harder than anything before it. Because now, there's no ambiguity left.
No uncertainty.
He knew. At some point, he knew. And everything that followed came after that knowledge. You realized she was dead. A pause. Then.
Yes.
The room holds that moment. Because this is where the line sharpens. This is where panic becomes decision. You had time to call for help. No response. You had time to tell someone. Still nothing. But instead, you chose to hide it. He closes his eyes again.
Yes.
The admission is quieter now. More distant. As if the weight of it is settling in for the first time. They move to the next phase. The backyard. The digging. How long did it take?
Hours.
Did you use tools?
Yes.
What kind? A shovel. Where did you get it?
Garage.
Everything is methodical now.
Clean. Precise.
Turning memory into record. Did you bury her immediately?
No.
What did you do first? He hesitates. Then. I wrapped her. In what? A blanket. From the house. The detail adds another layer, another decision, another step that required thought, action, time. Did you move her through the house?
Yes.
Was anyone nearby?
No.
Did anyone see you?
No.
Again, the certainty comes quickly, too quickly. But after 20 years, it's the narrative he's lived with, the version that kept him safe. The detectives continue. You buried her in the backyard.
Yes. How deep?
I don't know. Deep enough. The phrase echoes. Deep enough to hide. Deep enough to last.
And it did.
For 20 years. They pause. Let the timeline settle. Then one more shift. After that night, what did you do? He looks confused at first, like the question is too broad. You went back inside.
Yes.
What did you do? I cleaned up.
How?
Just wipe things down. What things? The floor.
The door.
Anywhere she touched. The methodical nature of it stands out. Not frantic. Not chaotic. Controlled. Deliberate. Did you dispose of anything?
Yes. What?
Her phone. Where? I threw it away. Where exactly? I don't remember. But the vagueness feels intentional now. Selective gaps in an otherwise detailed account. Did you keep anything?
No.
Another quick answer. Another point that will need verification. The detectives shift again. The days after. Did you notice the search?
Yes.
What did you think? He shrugs slightly. That they wouldn't find her. The simplicity of it is striking.
Cold. Detached.
As if the outcome was already decided in his mind. You stayed in the house.
Yes.
While they searched.
Yes.
The proximity is staggering. Volunteers, officers, neighbors, all looking, calling her name, unaware that the answer was just beneath their feet. Did anyone come to your door?
No.
The pattern repeats.
No witnesses. No interruptions. No mistakes.
At least not then. They move forward. You left not long after.
Yes. Why?
I just wanted to move. But the timing matters. It always does. You left within months of her disappearance.
Yes.
Coincidence? He doesn't answer. Because some questions don't need answers. They already have them. The room settles into a different kind of silence now. Not waiting, not searching, processing. Because the story is no longer fragmented. It's forming. A clear line from that night in 2003 to this room. To this moment. To this confession. But even now, something lingers beneath it all. Something unresolved. Because knowing what happened doesn't explain everything. Doesn't explain why her. Why that night. Why it escalated the way it did. And as the detectives sit there, listening to the man who carried this secret for 20 years, one thing becomes clear. The case may no longer be cold. But the darkness that created it hasn't fully been uncovered yet. The confession changed the case forever, but it did not answer every question. A confession can reveal what happened, but it cannot always reveal why. And for a family that spent 20 years trapped between hope and grief, the difference matters. Knowing where she was found is one thing. Knowing how she was taken from them is another. The truth has finally entered the room, but it arrives carrying more pain than relief. Outside the courthouse, cameras wait. The story that disappeared for 2 decades is suddenly everywhere again. California cold case solved. Missing teen mystery ends with shocking arrest. 20-year investigation leads to murder charge. The headlines move fast. The public reacts quickly. People who barely remembered the case suddenly remember everything. The face from old missing posters. The name that once appeared on street corners and community boards. The teenager whose disappearance became a question no one could answer. Now there is an answer. But answers can hurt. Her family sits through the first hearings in silence. They listen as prosecutors describe the evidence. The location, the DNA, the confession, the timeline that investigators spent years rebuilding. Every detail brings her closer. And every detail brings back the night they lost her. Her mother listens without looking away. For 20 years, she lived with uncertainty, the hardest kind of pain, the kind that never allows a person to fully grieve because a small part of them is always waiting. Waiting for a phone call, waiting for a knock at the door, waiting for footsteps outside the house. Now that waiting is over. But the empty chair remains. The photographs remain. The memories remain. A conviction can deliver justice, but it cannot reverse time. Behind the scenes, investigators continue digging deeper, because even after the confession, there are unanswered questions. They need to know if everything he said is true. They need to separate what happened from what he wants people to believe happened. Confessions are powerful, but evidence tells its own story. They return to the original crime scene. The house. The backyard. The place where the investigation finally broke open. Forensic teams examine every detail again, not because they doubt what they found, but because every cold case carries hidden layers. Every old piece of evidence has a story waiting to be uncovered. The backyard becomes a timeline. The soil reveals movement. The location reveals opportunity. The distance between the house and where she was last seen becomes more significant than ever. Investigators recreate the final hours. The route she walked. The time she sent the message. The moment someone noticed her. The moment everything changed. And one question keeps returning. Was she targeted that night? Or had she been watched before? The detectives revisit old interviews from 2003. Friends. Neighbors.
Classmates.
They search for anything missed the first time. A strange comment. A suspicious encounter. A moment that seemed meaningless back then, but carries a different meaning now. And slowly, a pattern begins to appear. Small details. Almost invisible. A neighbor remembers seeing the man outside more often than usual around that time. Another remembers that he seemed interested in people passing by his property. Nothing that would have led to an arrest. Nothing that would have stopped what happened. But enough to show that the night she disappeared may not have been random. The investigators examine his history before California. Then after. They find a pattern of isolation, frequent moves, a tendency to disappear from communities before anyone knew him well. No major criminal record. No dramatic warning signs. Just a person who blended in. And that becomes one of the most disturbing parts of the case. He didn't look dangerous. He didn't act dangerous. He looked ordinary. And ordinary can be the hardest thing to see through. Neighbors describe the same image over and over. Quiet. Polite. Private. The kind of person people forget 5 minutes after meeting. But behind closed doors, investigators believe something much darker existed. The courtroom becomes the place where those two versions collide. The man the neighborhood knew, and the man the evidence revealed. The prosecution builds its case carefully. They do not rely only on the confession. They show the timeline. They show the location. They show the DNA. They show the decisions made after the crime. Because the most important part of the case is not only what happened that night. It is what happened afterward. The cleanup. The burial. The silence. The years of pretending nothing happened. That is where prosecutors argue the truth becomes undeniable. Because a moment of panic lasts seconds. But hiding someone for 20 years requires choices. Thousands of them. Every morning. Every night. Every time he walked past that backyard. Every time he saw the porch lights. Every time the community searched. Every time her family waited. 20 years of choices. The defense tries to create uncertainty. They question memory. They question the investigation. They question whether every detail in the confession can be trusted. Because even when evidence seems overwhelming, every trial becomes a battle over interpretation. But the prosecution returns to the same point. The evidence is not built on one thing. It is built on everything. The DNA. The location. The timeline. The confession. The pieces that existed separately for years, but finally connected. The trial attracts national attention. People follow every update. The story becomes a reminder of something many families of missing people already know. A case can disappear from headlines. But it never disappears from the people who are searching. Cold cases do not expire. They wait. Sometimes for technology. Sometimes for a witness. Sometimes for someone to finally look at the evidence differently. In this case, the breakthrough came from a combination of time and persistence. A message once dismissed as teenage fear became a warning. A backyard once ignored became a crime scene. A forgotten name became the center of an investigation. And a mystery that haunted a community for decades finally had a direction. But one question remains in every conversation about the case. How did he live with it? How did someone wake up every morning knowing the truth? How did he walk through the same streets? How did he watch the world search? There is no answer that feels large enough. No explanation that makes sense. Because some crimes are not remembered only because of what happened. They are remembered because of what happened afterward. The silence. The waiting. The years lost. The moments that families can never recover. As the trial moves forward, the community watches. The same community that once searched fields and neighborhoods. The same people who held candles and shared missing posters. Now they sit in courtrooms waiting for a final judgment. Not because it can fix the past, but because justice is the only thing left to give. And after 20 years of questions, after 20 years of darkness, one thing is finally certain. She was not forgotten. Her name survived. Her story survived. And the secret that someone tried to bury with her was never buried forever. The courtroom is silent when the verdict is finally delivered. Not the silence of uncertainty. Not the silence of unanswered questions. A different kind. The silence of a moment everyone knows they will remember for the rest of their lives. 20 years of waiting have led to this room. 20 years of unanswered calls, unanswered questions, and a family forced to live between hope and heartbreak. The missing poster that once hung on walls. The photographs that never left the house. The porch light that stayed on night after night. All of it led here. The defendant sits motionless. Older now. Gray replacing the person he was in 2003. Time changed his appearance. But time did not erase what happened. The judge looks down at the documents in front of him, pages filled with evidence, testimony, and details from a case that refused to disappear. A case that began with a teenager walking into the California night. A case that became one of the community's deepest wounds. A case that became a cold case. Until it wasn't. The verdict is read.
Guilty.
The word travels through the courtroom like a wave. Some people close their eyes. Some lower their heads. Some simply breathe out, as if they have been holding that breath for 2 decades. Outside, reporters rush toward cameras. The story that once began with disappearance now ends with accountability. But for the family, there is no celebration. There is no victory. Only a complicated mixture of relief and grief. Because justice has arrived late. Very late. And late justice carries its own pain. Her mother speaks publicly for the first time in years.
Her voice is not angry.
It is tired. A voice shaped by waiting. She says she always knew her daughter deserved the truth. She says she never stopped believing someone would eventually answer for what happened. And then she says the words that silence the room. I just wish she could have seen this day. Because that is the cruelest part of every solved cold case. The truth returns. But the person who needed it most is gone. The investigation officially closes, but detectives continue reviewing the file. Not because the verdict is uncertain, but because every investigator knows that a case is more than evidence. It is a person. A life. A story. They return to the beginning. The summer of 2003. Before the headlines. Before the search parties. Before the world knew her name. She was not a case number. She was not a photograph on a missing poster. She was a daughter. A friend. A teenager with plans. A person who had no idea that one ordinary night would become the center of a 20-year mystery. Investigators reconstruct her final days. Friends describe her personality. Funny. Curious. Independent. The kind of person who made people feel comfortable around her. They remember the small things. The music she liked. The places she visited. The jokes she told. The dreams she had. Because after years of focusing on how she disappeared, people finally begin focusing again on who she was. And that matters. Because victims are often reduced to the moment they were lost. But they existed long before that moment. She had a life before the case. And her family wants the world to remember that. Meanwhile, the community continues processing the shocking reality that the answer was so close for so long. The house where she was found had never looked suspicious. That is what disturbed people the most. It was not an abandoned building. Not a hidden location in the middle of nowhere. It was a normal home. A place people passed every day. A place that blended into the neighborhood. And that realization changes how people see their own surroundings. Because the most frightening mysteries are not always hidden in dark places. Sometimes they exist in ordinary places. Behind ordinary doors. Among ordinary people. The detectives involved speak about the investigation years later. They describe the frustration of cold cases. The feeling of opening a file filled with unanswered questions. The challenge of separating assumptions from facts. Because in 2003, the investigation followed what seemed logical at the time. A missing teenager.
Possible runaway.
Limited evidence. No body. No clear suspect. No obvious crime scene. But years later, technology changed what was possible. DNA analysis became more advanced. Digital records became more detailed. Old evidence gained new meaning. The case was not solved because one person suddenly remembered. It was solved because the past met the future. A message from 2003. A DNA profile from decades later. A piece of land that held the answer. A combination of small discoveries finally creating one undeniable truth. The arrest shocked the community. Many people who had lived near the suspect struggled to understand how someone could hide such a secret. Neighbors who once greeted him casually now watched news reports trying to recognize the person behind the crime. The same question appeared everywhere. How could nobody know? But investigators explained that people often imagine dangerous individuals as obvious. They expect warning signs. They expect chaos. They expect someone who looks different. But many cases reveal something much more disturbing. Some people hide in plain sight. They build ordinary lives. They smile. They work. They talk to neighbors. They become invisible because they appear normal. And that invisibility becomes their greatest protection. Until something breaks through. In this case, the breakthrough was years away. But it came. The cold case that haunted California for decades finally reached its conclusion. Yet even with the conviction, there are still moments that remain impossible to explain. The final seconds. The fear behind her message. The reason she felt watched. The thoughts running through her mind during those last moments. Questions that no investigation can fully answer. Questions that remain with families forever. The community creates a memorial in her honor. A place where people can remember more than the tragedy. Flowers appear. Candles appear. Messages appear. People who never met her leave words for someone they only knew through a photograph. Because some stories become part of a community's identity. Some names become connected to a place forever. Her name becomes a reminder. A reminder that missing people are never just missing files. They're people waiting to be found. They're families waiting for answers. They're stories waiting to be completed. The final chapter of the investigation closes years after the disappearance. The case file is no longer marked active. The evidence is stored. The courtroom is empty. The detectives move on to other cases. But the memory remains. Because the most powerful part of a cold case is not only the moment it is solved. It is the journey. The years of searching. The refusal to forget. The belief that even the darkest mystery can eventually be uncovered. For 20 years, the question remained the same. Where was she? Now they know. But the answer came with a price. A price measured in years. In memories. In birthdays she never celebrated. In moments her family had to experience without her. And as the sun sets over California, the neighborhood that once held a secret finally begins to heal. The porch light that stayed on for 20 years is finally turned off. Not because they stopped caring. Not because they stopped remembering. But because the search is over. The truth is known. And after 2 decades trapped in darkness, her story has finally been brought into the light. The porch light was finally turned off. After 20 years. A small action. Almost meaningless to anyone passing by. But for one family, it represented something enormous. For 2 decades, that light had been a symbol, a signal sent into the darkness, a silent message that said, "We're still waiting." It burned through seasons, through anniversaries, through moments when hope became harder to hold. Now, there was nothing left to wait for. The truth had arrived. But truth does not erase pain. It only changes the shape of it. The California neighborhood where the disappearance began slowly returns to normal. The cameras disappear. The reporters leave. The police tape is gone. The crowds that once gathered outside the courthouse move on to other stories. That is how the world works. A tragedy can consume a community for years. Then one day, the headlines change. But for those who lived it, there is no moving on. Only moving forward. The family begins the difficult process of rebuilding a life around an absence that finally has an explanation. Before, there was uncertainty. A terrible, endless question. Now there is certainty. And certainty can be both a gift and a wound. Because knowing what happened means accepting that it really happened. There is no more possibility. No more imagined reunion. No more wondering if she might suddenly walk through the door. The hardest part of a cold case being solved is that justice and grief often arrive together. The investigation may end. The court may close. But the emotional trial continues forever. Behind the official reports and courtroom statements is another story. The story of everyone who searched. The volunteers who walked through fields. The neighbors who checked roads. The officers who returned to the file year after year. The people who refused to let a missing teenager become just another forgotten name. Because cold cases are not solved by evidence alone. They are solved by persistence. By people willing to look again. To question old assumptions. To believe that answers still exist, even when time says otherwise. The detective who reopened the case reflects on the first moment he saw the file. Hundreds of pages. Old interviews. Photographs. Reports from a different era of investigation. At first glance, it looked like a case that had already been examined from every possible angle. But something bothered him. The message. That one sentence. I think someone is watching me. A sentence that had been sitting quietly for years. Waiting for someone to understand what it really meant. Because sometimes the most important clue is not the biggest piece of evidence. Sometimes it is the smallest detail everyone overlooked. The message was not a teenage exaggeration. It was awareness.
Fear.
A warning. And once investigators changed the way they viewed those words, the entire case changed. The disappearance was no longer a mystery of someone who left. It became a story of someone who was taken. That shift changed everything. The investigation moved from searching for a missing person to searching for a person responsible. And that difference was the turning point. Years earlier, investigators had searched outward.
Roads.
Highways. Unknown locations. Possible escape routes. But the answer was never far away. It was close. Almost painfully close. The house. The backyard. The place where the final secret remained hidden. One of the most disturbing discoveries from the investigation was how ordinary everything looked. There was no dramatic scene. No obvious warning. No sign that something terrible had happened behind those walls. That is what haunted investigators. The normal appearance. The everyday nature of the place. Because evil does not always announce itself. Sometimes it hides behind routine. Behind a closed door. Behind a familiar face. And that reality changed the way many people in the community viewed their surroundings. Neighbors began asking questions they had never thought to ask. How well do we really know the people around us? How much do we miss because we expect danger to look a certain way? The case became more than a solved crime. It became a reminder. A reminder that appearances can deceive. A reminder that silence can last for years. and a reminder that the past is never completely gone. Technology played a major role in bringing the truth forward. In 2003, investigators had limited options. Evidence existed, but the tools to fully understand it did not. Years later, science caught up. DNA technology transformed old evidence into new information. Records once considered incomplete became valuable. Methods once impossible became routine. The investigation became a bridge between two different worlds. The world where she disappeared, and the world where she was finally found. That is the strange nature of cold cases. They are frozen moments in time, waiting for the future to arrive. A case can sit untouched for years. Then one discovery changes everything. One test. One conversation. One person deciding to look again. And suddenly, a story that seemed finished begins moving again. The suspect's arrest also changed the way the community remembered the case. Before the arrest, people remembered the mystery, the questions, the uncertainty. After the arrest, they remembered her. Not just the disappearance, not just the investigation. Her. The teenager who had friends, dreams, a future that should have continued. Family members began sharing more memories. Stories from before the tragedy. Moments that showed who she really was. Because they wanted the world to understand something important. She was not defined by how she died. She was defined by how she lived. That became the focus of memorial events held after the case concluded. People gathered not only to talk about the crime. They gathered to celebrate a life. Candles filled the night. Photographs were displayed. Names were spoken. And for the first time in years, her story was told without only asking what happened to her. It was also about who she was. The investigators involved in the case carry the memory with them as well. Because solving a cold case does not mean leaving it behind. Some cases stay with the people who work them. They remember the families, the conversations, the moments when hope almost disappeared. They remember opening old files and seeing a person waiting inside those pages. Not just evidence. A human being. A life interrupted. A family searching. And that is why these cases matter. Because behind every cold case headline is someone who never stopped waiting. Someone who continued asking questions when the world moved on. Someone who believed that the truth was still somewhere ahead. Years after the arrest, the case remains one of California's most haunting reminders of time's strange power. Time can bury evidence. Time can create distance. Time can make people believe a mystery will never be solved. But time can also reveal what was hidden. It can bring new technology, new perspectives, new chances. The truth does not always arrive quickly. Sometimes it takes years, sometimes decades. But when it finally comes, it changes everything. The neighborhood has changed since 2003. New houses, new families, new faces. But beneath the surface, history remains. The street where a teenager disappeared. The house where a secret was hidden. The place where a question remained unanswered for 20 years. Now, the question has an answer. The cold case is no longer cold. The missing teen mystery is no longer a mystery. But the memory remains. Because some stories are not remembered because they ended. They are remembered because people refuse to let them disappear. And after 20 years of silence, after decades of uncertainty, one final truth remains. No matter how deep a secret is buried, no matter how long it waits, the past always finds a way to return. The institutional shockwaves generated by this landmark conviction rippled far beyond the immediate geographical borders of the coastal California county, instantly transforming the case into a celebrated national textbook example for the explosive power of investigative genetic genealogy in solving frozen homicide files. Law enforcement agencies across the entire country began aggressively auditing their own dusty archives, suddenly acutely aware that no cold case is ever truly dead as long as modern laboratories possess the tools to force microscopic biological traces to surrender their long-held secrets. For the residents of the quiet California suburb where the nightmare originally unfolded, the guilty verdict offered a deeply necessary, cathartic closing act to a decades-long saga of suspicion and collective trauma, though the psychological scars carved into the fabric of the neighborhood would remain forever unhealed. The neat suburban streets still feature the same picturesque architecture and manicured hedges, but the psychological landscape changed permanently the day the town realized that the ultimate threat had never lurked in the dark canyons of the city, but had lived right across the street, mowing his lawn and waving cheerfully through the coastal fog. True crime documentarians and investigative podcasts began dissecting the case layer by layer, turning the meticulous unraveling of the mystery into a masterclass on everyday sociopathy and the terrifying human capacity for compartmentalization. The astonishing reality of how a single drop of microscopic DNA managed to dismantle 20 years of airtight silence became an immortal legend about the boundaries of impunity, cementing the permanent truth that in a world governed by advancing science and unbending human will, no secret is ever truly safe from the long arm of ultimate accountability. Universities and forensic institutes rushed to update their curriculum, adding the California 2003 breakthrough as a premier case study in how interdisciplinary collaboration between genealogy experts and field detectives can breathe life back into seemingly impossible investigations. Retired officers who had spent decades carrying the quiet guilt of an unsolved file finally found a measure of personal redemption, watching from the sidelines as the fruit of their early foundational groundwork was harvested by the relentless march of genetic innovation. The community associations within the suburb held quiet town halls to discuss modern safety measures, yet everyone privately acknowledged that no amount of surveillance cameras or neighborhood watch patrols could ever truly guard against a threat wearing the familiar, trusted mask of a neighbor. The legal community debated the privacy implications of genetic databases, yet ultimately bowed before the staggering moral clarity of a solved murder, recognizing that the right of a community to live free from hidden predators far outweighed the abstract concerns of genetic privacy. Thus, the legacy of the case cemented itself not merely as a local triumph, but as a watershed moment in American criminal jurisprudence, forever altering the psychological contract between neighbors in quiet residential enclaves across the nation. The final chapters of this harrowing suburban saga continued to echo through the legal history books and academic symposia across the nation, cementing the California 2003 investigation as a monumental turning point in the relentless war against cold case impunity. Investigators, geneticists, and legal scholars gathered in crowded conference halls from coast to coast to dissect the intricate anatomy of the breakthrough, marveling at how a single microscopic fragment of biological evidence, preserved in a forgotten paper envelope for over 20 years, managed to dismantle a meticulously constructed web of deceit. The trial transcripts became required reading in premier criminal justice programs, utilized to train a new generation of detectives who would never again look at a decades-old file with resignation or defeat. In these classrooms, instructors emphasized that the true triumph of the case lay not merely in the application of cutting-edge technology, but in the unwavering tenacity of human persistence, the refusal of dedicated professionals to let a young victim fade into the murky depths of history without a fight. The broader societal conversation shifted dramatically toward the ethical expansion of familial DNA databases, weighing the delicate balance between individual genetic privacy and the absolute moral imperative of unmasking hidden predators who walk among us. Civil liberties advocates debated the finer points of genetic searches while acknowledging the crushing, irrefutable weight of a solved murder where science spoke with a clarity that left zero room for doubt. Meanwhile, back in the coastal California suburb, the psychological healing process remained painfully slow and deeply fractured. Neighbors who had shared barbecues, neighborhood meetings, and casual holiday greetings with a monster in plain sight continued to grapple with an existential dread that defied easy resolution. The comforting illusion of suburban safety, once taken entirely for granted, had been permanently shattered, replaced by an acute, hypervigilant awareness of the darkness that can lurk behind the most benign facades. Local community leaders organized neighborhood support forums and mental health workshops to help residents process the collective trauma of the betrayal, recognizing that the emotional fallout of the arrest would linger for generations. The legacy of the teenage victim was honored in deeply moving, permanent ways. A scholarship fund was established in her name at the local high school, ensuring that her ambitions, her bright laughter, and her unfulfilled future would be remembered not by the tragedy of her final night, but by the enduring hope and resilience of the community she left behind. As years continued to pass, the house where the terror had originated underwent successive changes of ownership, each new family attempting to scrub away the lingering phantoms of the past with fresh coats of paint, blooming gardens, and the sounds of children playing in the sunlit yard. Yet, beneath the surface of the manicured lawns and the quiet coastal fog, the community understood that certain historical scars never fully vanish. They remain etched into the foundational earth as a solemn, perpetual reminder of the fragility of human trust and the unyielding power of the truth to eventually claw its way back into the light. The ultimate conclusion of this chilling California criminal saga settles deep into the collective memory of a nation that watched in stunned disbelief as decades of silence were shattered by the relentless march of forensic science. The shadow of the year 2003, long defined by an agonizing vacuum of answers and the persistent ghost of a vanished teenager, finally lifted from the coastal suburb, replaced by the heavy, sobering reality of absolute accountability. The convicted murderer, now completely cut off from the sunlit streets and manicured lawns he had manipulated for over 20 years, sits in the austere, fluorescent-lit confines of a maximum security prison cell, stripped of every illusion of control and forced to reckon with the total collapse of his meticulously built facade. His days of walking freely among neighbors, smiling through local festivities, and hiding his dark reality behind a mask of everyday respectability are gone forever, replaced by the monotonous ticking of a life sentence that serves as a permanent testament to the inescapable reach of modern justice. For the family of the victim, the long and exhausting journey through the labyrinth of grief, false leads, and institutional roadblocks has reached its final, poignant resting place. The agonizing uncertainty that tormented them for nearly 3 decades has transformed into a bittersweet vindication, knowing that the world now remembers their beloved daughter not as a tragic, forgotten footnote in a dusty police archive, but as the catalyst for a monumental breakthrough that changed the face of criminal investigations across the entire country. Her resting place, once clouded by the painful mystery of an unresolved destiny, stands today as a symbol of unyielding endurance, draped in the quiet dignity of a truth that could not be silenced by time, neglect, or the passage of years. The impact of this landmark case continues to reverberate across law enforcement agencies nationwide, fundamentally rewriting the standard operating procedures for cold case units from coast to coast. Detectives and criminal investigators now view archived files not as dead ends, but as sleeping depositories of evidence waiting for the inevitable evolution of technology to unlock their secrets. The integration of investigative genetic genealogy into everyday police work has transformed from a radical experimental method into an indispensable pillar of modern crime fighting, giving voice to countless victims whose cases might otherwise have faded permanently into obscurity. Forensic laboratories have received renewed funding, advanced training programs have been established, and interdisciplinary teams consisting of geneticists, genealogists, and seasoned homicide detectives are now routinely deployed to breathe new life into decades-old mysteries. The legacy of the California 2003 breakthrough stands as proof positive that time is no longer an absolute ally to those who believe they can escape the consequences of their darkest deeds. In academic institutions, the case is studied with meticulous care, providing future legal minds and forensic experts with a masterclass in how patience, scientific innovation, and moral persistence can dismantle even the most complex webs of deception. The philosophical debate surrounding genetic privacy continues to evolve in legislative chambers, yet it is invariably balanced against the profound moral clarity delivered by a solved murder where science speaks with a voice that cannot be denied. Back in the quiet California suburb where the nightmare originally unfolded, the passage of time has begun to soothe the jagged edges of collective trauma, even if the neighborhood landscape remains permanently altered. The residents who lived through the terrifying days of the disappearance, the agonizing years of silence, and the ultimate shock of the neighbor's arrest have forged a deeper, more resilient sense of community connection, tempered by a permanent, mature awareness of human fragility. The old fears have not entirely vanished, but they have been replaced by a quiet vigilance and an understanding that safety is not merely a geographic location or a locked front door, but an active commitment to truth, empathy, and community awareness. The local high school continues to award its annual scholarship in the name of the victim, ensuring that successive generations of students learn her story not as a cautionary tale of horror, but as an enduring testament to the power of hope and the refusal of a community to let innocence be permanently stolen by the shadows. As the Pacific coastal fog rolls in over the rooftops each evening, wrapping the quiet streets in its familiar, damp embrace, the town rests with a newfound peace, knowing that the ghosts of the past have finally been laid to rest. The final chapter of the 2003 cold case is written not in the ink of unsolved mysteries, but in the permanent, unyielding triumph of justice, proving once and for all that no matter how deep a secret is buried under the layers of time and routine, the truth will always find a way to claw its way back to the surface.